My boyfriend's brother crossed the line, and I realized that my boyfriend would not help me escape from danger. I remember the day I met my boyfriend's family for the first time, I remember a surreal slow-motion scene in a movie. My heart was racing, my hands clutched nervously around the strap of my little shoulder bag, and I had the strangest sensation of my cheeks being hot and my breath going shallow. It was one of those glorious sunny days in late summer, the kind of day that begs you to stand outside in its warmth, soak in the bright sunlight, and feel perfectly alive. I was fairly new to the state, having moved here from my hometown just about a month before we started dating. It was all so fast, so unexpected, and I guess in many ways that quickness was both thrilling and terrifying. I'd known my boyfriend, I'll call him Travis, for about a month online before we got together. We'd become long-distance friends, chatting on social media and occasionally texting each other random memes or short voice notes. At some point, we realized we both lived in the same country, not incredibly far away, though I was living in a neighboring state. He always told me how he was super close with his family, especially his dad and his brother, whom he idolized for being the real comedic genius in the family. I suppose I was excited to meet them, but there was also a hint of anxiety in the pit of my stomach at the thought of being judged or found lacking. That day, Travis and I had driven to his parents' house for a family barbecue, a typical gathering of his large, boisterous, extended family. The yard was crowded with people. I saw a mix of folks who looked around my age or younger, teenage cousins running around, older folks in lawn chairs, middle-aged aunts who seemed busy organizing trays of food, and so on. The air smelled of charcoal grills and sweet, tangy barbecue sauce, punctuated by the distinct whiffs of coleslaw and potato salad. Laughter and music filled the atmosphere, and my nerves were both eased and heightened by the chaotic energy all around me. Travis squeezed my shoulder with a reassuring gesture. "Don't worry," he whispered into my ear, leaning in close so I could hear him over the music. "Everyone already loves you. They've seen your pictures. They know you're gorgeous. You've got nothing to be nervous about." He gave me this flashy grin that would have made me smile under normal circumstances. But the subtle mention of them seeing pictures of me made me feel weirdly exposed. I hadn't thought much of it before, but imagining his parents, siblings, and cousins scrolling through pictures or hearing commentary about me, my looks, my body, felt a little invasive, even if I'd consented. At the time, I shook off the queasy feeling because I wanted to make a good first impression. I wanted to convince myself it was completely normal. Just typical proud boyfriend talk. I plastered on a polite smile and wove around the yard with him, meeting the seemingly endless chain of relatives. It was almost comedic how one aunt would flag him down, yelling, "Travis, get over here. Let me meet your girl," only for us to be pulled away minutes later by a cousin or someone else. It felt like I was the new exhibit in a traveling show. And as overwhelming as it was, I also found myself feeling oddly welcome. People were hugging me, offering me plates of food, telling me all about Travis's embarrassing childhood memories. That part was sweet. It felt like they saw me as important enough to share all these personal stories. I tried to stay open-minded and not let the anxious little voice in my head overshadow the warmth I was receiving. At some point, Travis's mother, whom I'll call Linda, swept me up in a grand hug. She had the same bright eyes as Travis, only with more wrinkles from years of smiling, and she sported these fun, chunky bangles that jingled whenever she moved her arm. She pulled me aside to the buffet table, introduced me to a few neighbors or family friends who had popped in, and basically demanded I eat something. "You've got to taste Robert's pork ribs," she insisted, pointing to her husband, Travis's dad, who was flipping rib slabs on a large grill. He's real proud of, swears it's a secret marinade, but I know he just dumps half a bottle of barbecue sauce into a pot and calls it a day. After a few more rounds of small talk and trying to juggle a plate full of food with a bottle of soda, I found myself relaxing. The day was shaping up to be fun, lighthearted, with that big family energy where half the people are dancing in the backyard, the other half are sitting around in lawn chairs sipping cocktails or beer, and children keep sprinting around in circles, shrieking with laughter. Through that swirl of activity, I finally noticed Travis's older brother, whom I'll call Dave, stumbling onto the back porch with a can of beer in his hand. I recognized him from photos. Travis had shown me pictures of him a bunch of times. Dave had this slightly disheveled look about him, and I could tell from a distance that he'd probably had one drink too many. My boyfriend beckoned me over, and we ended up sitting down on the wooden steps of the porch, Travis on my left, Dave on my right. We chit-chatted about random topics. Dave was complaining about work stress. Travis teased Dave for how sloppy he always got at family gatherings. Dave teased back, saying something about how Travis was the baby of the family. It was banter, but the tension in Dave's voice clued me in that maybe he'd had a lot more than just a few beers. That was when everything took an unexpected nosedive. Dave leaned forward, almost toppling off the porch step. He smirked in my direction, eyes bloodshot, and said in this slurred, conspiratorial tone, "Hey, so, did you ever, send him a tit pic?" You should have. He punctuated this with the kind of laugh that you hear from someone who knows they're being inappropriate but finds it hilarious anyway. It was like someone had thrown a bucket of icy water all over. My entire body tensed. My cheeks started burning, not just from embarrassment, but from this sudden wave of disgust and discomfort. It wasn't even the question alone, although that was mortifying enough. It was the fact that he blurted it out in the middle of a family barbecue, within earshot of cousins, uncles, aunts, and who knows who else was milling around. My gut reaction was a forced, nervous laugh as I said, "What? Why would you ask me that?" My eyes darted to Travis, hoping he would come to my rescue, say something firm to shut Dave down. But all Travis did was awkwardly brush Dave off with a lame, "Ah, come on, leave her alone." Inside, I was thinking, this is absolutely not okay. I was so uncomfortable, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. My mind jumped to the times Travis said he'd shown pictures of me to his family, and I started wondering how exactly he talked about me behind closed doors. Did he brag about my body? Did he show them sexy selfies? I certainly gave permission for Travis to show them normal pictures, like the kind you share with your friends or family when you're talking about your significant other. But I had never, ever given permission for him to show or describe me in sexual context to his family. The concept alone made my skin crawl. I stood up, letting out a stiff, "I'm gonna go see what everyone's doing in the yard," and left them behind without looking back. I spent the rest of the afternoon trying to ignore the churning feeling in my stomach. I smiled politely at Linda when she offered me dessert, cheered along when Travis's dad broke into a rowdy dance, and tried to focus on the upbeat music. But behind that facade, I was thinking about Dave's question and the meaning behind it. Why did he assume I'd send something like that? Where did that assumption come from? Did Travis specifically tell his family how hot he thought my body was in lurid detail? The idea of being reduced to that kind of commentary, especially with family, gave me a sense of dread I couldn't shake. Eventually, Travis noticed I was off on my own, standing near a group of distant relatives whom I didn't really know. So he wandered over, gave me a sweet smile, and whispered, "Everything okay?" All I did was shrug. I didn't want to have a messy argument in the middle of his family event, so I plastered on an "I'm fine" expression and let him lead me back inside. Later, when we were alone, I brought it up. I tried to keep my voice level, but there was trembling anger in it. "Hey, your brother made that weird comment about pictures," I said quietly, biting my lip. It was really uncomfortable for me. Did you say something to him about my body? Because it felt... Travis cut me off with a sigh, the kind that suggests he thought I was making a big deal out of nothing. "I'm tired," he mumbled. "Let's just chill out. You're taking it too seriously." His tone had this subtle edge of frustration, like he was disappointed in me for not going along with the usual dynamic of his family, like I wasn't being a good sport about a fun joke. I felt the sting of tears behind my eyes, a lump forming in my throat. "But it really bothered me," I insisted, voice quivering. He crossed a line. He can't be asking me those things, especially in front of everyone. But Travis merely repeated that I was overreacting, that Dave was just drunk, and that if I was going to be part of the family, I'd have to develop a thicker skin. That little conversation left me feeling hollow. I was disappointed that Travis didn't seem to see my perspective. I also felt somehow guilty, like maybe I was the one who couldn't take a joke. But deep down, I knew it was more than this. Wasn't your typical off-color family humor. It was disrespectful, invasive, and sexual. Part of me told myself, just let it go. Don't rock the boat. But another part festered with a sense of betrayal that Travis didn't stand up for me. The weeks rolled by, and I found myself over at Travis's family home again, this time for a smaller gathering. It was Travis's dad's birthday, and only the immediate family plus a few close family friends were around, but still a good number of people. They were setting up karaoke in the living room, and this time, I'd been feeling more at ease. At least until Dave arrived. I watched him from across the room as he slumped in a chair, arms folded, looking bored and surly. I couldn't tell if he was sober or not, but something about his body language made me uneasy. Eventually, Travis and his dad decided to belt out a cheerful oldies tune together on the karaoke machine. His mother and sister started arranging dinner plates in the kitchen, the clinking of silverware and soft hum of conversation filling the air. In that moment, I was seated on the couch, holding Travis's little nephew on my lap. He was such a sweet kid, chubby cheeks and bright, curious eyes. He'd been showing me his new plush dinosaur, making it roar in my face. And I was giggling at him, trying to keep him entertained while the men sang. Suddenly, Dave dropped down onto the couch right next to me. And I do mean drop. He sort of collapsed, making the cushions bounce. I startled, glancing at him with a forced smile. "Hey," I said slowly, trying not to show my discomfort. Dave's eyes were glassy, as though he were in a trance or maybe a hungover haze. He looked at the nephew on my lap, cracked some half-hearted smile, and then, in an instant, I felt his hand on my side, near my waist. It took me a second to realize what was happening. I assumed at first that he was reaching behind me for the remote or something, but then I felt pressure. My entire body froze as a rush of adrenaline surged through my bloodstream. My mind was racing, thinking, is this an accident? Why would he need to grab that part of me for any reason? Horrified, I whipped my head to face him, and that's when he feigned some innocent confusion. What? He said, withdrawing his hand. I was just looking for my phone. Take it easy. The little nephew on my lap looked between us with big eyes as if sensing the tension. My face burned with mortification, that same sense of violation creeping over me again. The fact that Dave had done this while his nephew was literally on my lap made it feel even more grotesque. My heart hammered in my chest and I wanted to scream, but I felt trapped, pinned under a sense of disbelief and fear. I quickly scooted away, placed the kid next to me on the couch, and then mumbled some excuse about needing to help in the kitchen. My hands were trembling as I got up, though. I glanced around to see if anyone noticed, but Travis and his dad were still singing, and the rest of the family seemed to be otherwise occupied. No one seemed to have caught Dave's behavior. For the rest of the night, I stuck to Travis's mom and sister like glue. I made small talk about the marinade for the chicken, about the upcoming holiday season, about the last time they visited so-and-so. Anything to keep my mind off the lingering feeling of Dave's hand on my waist. I knew in my gut that this wasn't just an accident, yet I also knew that if I confronted Dave in front of everyone, it would probably turn into a chaotic mess, especially if no one had witnessed it. So I tried to keep my composure until I could talk to Travis privately. When we left that evening, I felt a wave of relief just being outside the house. The ride home was quiet, Travis humming along to the radio, me staring out the window in brooding silence. Once we were back at his apartment, I finally told him what happened, my voice trembling, my chest tight, tears brimming in my eyes. I tried to articulate how much it had frightened me, how Dave's behavior was completely out of line, how it wasn't a joke or an accident. I expected Travis to finally see the gravity of the situation, to say, "I'm so sorry, I'll talk to him," or something supportive. Instead, he shrugged again, scratched the back of his neck and gave me the same dismissive lines. "Look, he's not that type of guy. He's been acting weird because he lost his job recently. He's stressed out. I'm sure he didn't mean it." I was stunned. I even asked, "So you think I'm making this up? You think I'm exaggerating?" Tears threatened to spill down my cheeks, and I fought them back, feeling a mixture of rage and heartbreak. How could the person who claimed to love me not care that I felt violated by his own brother? Travis sighed and said, "I never said that. I'm just saying you're looking too deep into it. He was probably just reaching for his phone, and you freaked out." That was our dynamic for a while. Me growing increasingly uneasy around his family, particularly Dave, and Travis acting like I was the one with the problem. It was exhausting, both emotionally and mentally. I found myself making excuses not to join them for get-togethers. I didn't trust Dave, and I also resented that Travis wouldn't stand up. Whenever I tried to bring it up again, Travis would wave me off, telling me to chill or to give Dave a break. I started feeling like a burden in my own relationship. My self-esteem took a hit. I questioned whether I was too sensitive or just plain unable to roll with the family's brand of humor. At the same time, logic told me that my boundaries were completely normal and valid, that it was not okay for someone to sexually harass me. Things escalated in our relationship in small but telling ways. Travis would occasionally make slightly disrespectful jokes about my body, then act confused or annoyed when I told him it upset me. I remember one time, I was changing clothes in his bedroom, and he made a comment about how he told his buddies I had the best rack in town. I whipped around, outraged. "You told them what?" I asked, my voice shaking. He looked at me like I was overreacting again. "Don't be so uptight. They wanted to know if you were hot, and I said yes. Relax." All these little incidents eroded the trust and safety I initially felt with him. And yet, I hung on for a while, partly because I was in a new state, with minimal social support outside of him, and partly because I kept thinking it might get better. Or maybe I was just making too big a deal out of something. I was caught in that psychological loop of second-guessing myself, the same loop that many people experience in unhealthy relationships. Then came the day when everything collapsed in an explosive argument. It was only 4 months into our relationship, but it felt like we'd aged years in terms of conflict. I decided to confide in my aunt, who lived a few hours away. She was my mother's younger sister, a feisty woman in her 50s with a good head on her shoulders and a mama bear spirit. Over the phone, I broke down and spilled the entire story, from Dave's lewd comment at the barbecue to the accidental touching on the couch, to Travis's dismissive attitude. My aunt was furious on my behalf. She kept saying things like, "That's not normal," and "He has no right to belittle your experiences like that," and "You need to think about leaving him if he won't protect you from his family's disrespect." Her words were a lifeline. I'd felt so isolated and confused, but hearing her reassure me that my feelings were valid gave me the clarity I needed. "You're coming to stay with me for a bit," she declared. "I don't care if it's a long drive. Pack your bag, get to my house, and let's figure out your next steps. There was no question in her mind. She was determined to get me away from that toxic environment. I vividly remember the day I broke up with Travis. It was afternoon, and I'd just come from campus. I'd started college not long ago and classes were ramping up. I was balancing the stress of homework, new classmates, and now this emotional turmoil. I told Travis I wanted to meet him at a coffee shop near campus. When he showed up, I wasted no time. I'd rehearsed this speech in my head a dozen times, and even though my stomach was in knots, I forced the words out. I can't do this anymore. I can't be in a relationship where my boundaries aren't respected. I'm leaving. I expected shock, maybe sadness, but what I got was raw, unfiltered rage. His face twisted into an expression I'd never seen before, veins bulging on his neck. His voice rose to a booming yell, causing heads to turn in the small cafe. "You're an ungrateful bitch," he spat, slamming his fist on the table. "After everything I've done for you, you're seriously walking out on me? You're just nothing but an easy piece of ass. You hear me?" My eyes widened in horror. The entire coffee shop went silent for a moment, and then I heard low murmurs of shock. I felt tears gathering, but I also felt a spark of anger. How dare he say that to me, especially in front of so many people? My voice shook when I managed, "Don't you ever talk to me like that again?" I grabbed my bag and turned to walk away. He leaped up from the table, following me, still yelling obscenities. That's when a bystander, some tall guy who had been sipping his latte, stepped forward and told Travis he needed to calm down. Eventually, the coffee shop manager threatened to call security if Travis didn't leave. He stormed out, still cursing under his breath, leaving me there with tears streaming down my face, feeling humiliated and simultaneously relieved. In that moment, I knew that everything I'd felt was validated. A healthy, loving partner would never explode on me like that. For days afterward, I carried the shame of that public scene, worried people would judge me. But more than that, I carried a sense of liberation that I'd finally broken free. In the aftermath, I stayed with my aunt, who helped me pick up the pieces. She was the one who introduced me to women's support groups, communities where I met others who'd gone through varying degrees of unhealthy, abusive, or manipulative relationships. Some of the women there had endured far worse than what I had, but that didn't minimize my experiences. Instead, it made me realize that a relationship didn't have to be physically violent to be toxic. Emotional disrespect, disregard for boundaries, and verbal abuse are all red flags that shouldn't be ignored. One of the most transformative experiences was speaking openly with others who understood how complicated it is to extract yourself from a harmful relationship. We talked about everything: why we sometimes ignore red flags, how abusers or toxic partners can charm us in the beginning, how it can happen to anyone regardless of age or background. I learned that we often hold on because we want to give the other person a chance or because we doubt ourselves. But at the end of the day, if you feel unsafe or disrespected, that's reason enough to leave. No explanation or justification is necessary. That realization felt like a new dawn for me. Although the heartbreak was real, I'd cared for Travis and it hurt to lose the relationship. I was more upset about what might have happened if I'd stayed. Would Dave have escalated his creepy behavior? Would Travis have become even more dismissive or controlling? That question lingered, but I chose to see the breakup as a major bullet dodge. Over time, I threw myself into healing. The support groups helped me see what healthy boundaries look like and how a caring partner should behave. My aunt was with me every step of the way, offering her mama bear love. We'd have long conversations on her back porch, sipping tea, while she told me stories from her own younger days, relationships that didn't work out, red flags she missed, and times she found her own voice to stand up for herself. Those talks made me feel less alone. They also made me realize that so many people experience something like this, and I felt a sense of solidarity, not shame. Month by month, I focused on school and on rebuilding my sense of self-worth. I surrounded myself with healthy friendships, found a small group of classmates who'd study with me in the library, and even joined a volunteering club on campus. Being around positive, supportive people helped me heal more than anything. In the quiet of my aunt's guest bedroom, I would journal about my fears, that I'd never trust anyone again, that I was damaged goods, that maybe I was somehow to blame for not seeing Travis's true nature earlier. Gradually, with counseling and the support groups, I recognized that I wasn't at fault. It wasn't wrong of me to believe that Travis was a nice person at first. The deception was his failing, not mine. Still, the worry that I'd attract another manipulative partner loomed over me like a dark cloud. For a while, I decided that swearing off dating entirely might be the safest bet. But at the same time, I knew that an absolute fear of relationships wasn't healthy either, and that not every guy in the world was going to be like Travis. There are good men out there, kind, compassionate men who respect boundaries. In the support groups, I met a few survivors who had moved on to wonderful relationships, and that gave me hope. That brings me to my life now. I'm 20 years old, finishing my second year of college, and for the past several months, I haven't been dating at all. Most of my focus has been on school, my part-time job at a local bookstore, and my personal healing journey. Then a few weeks ago, a classmate of mine, let's call him Jordan, asked me out on a date. We'd been study partners in Biology 101 for a semester, working on group projects and sharing notes. He's polite, respectful, and not pushy. He helps me understand complex topics in class, and he's always quick to offer a friendly ear if I need to vent about an upcoming exam. Part of me was flattered by the invitation, and I did think it might be nice to go out with a guy who seems genuinely sweet. But the other part of me was terrified. That internal monologue started up again. Remember what happened with Travis? He seemed nice at first, too. What if Jordan turns out the same way or worse? My anxiety skyrocketed. As much progress as I'd made, the idea of stepping back into the dating pool triggered. I recalled the humiliations and gaslighting I'd experienced. So I told Jordan, with as much honesty and gentleness as I could, I'm not ready to date right now. I've had some bad experiences and I just need some time. His reaction gave me a glimmer of hope. He looked me in the eye, nodded thoughtfully and said, I understand. If you ever change your mind, I'm here, and if not, I'm still your friend. No anger, no arguments, no condescending remarks, just calm acceptance. It felt almost too good to be true, and yet maybe that's how people who respect you respond when you set a boundary. The relief I felt was immeasurable. It was like a testament to how I was finally learning to ask for what I needed, and that there were men out there who could handle that without lashing out. Still, I'm wrestling with these old fears. I often wonder if the red flags in a relationship might be subtler next time. If there's a new way I could be blindsided. My mind spirals a bit, imagining scenarios in which I'm betrayed. But I'm working on it in therapy and at the support group. One woman there told me, we can't control the future, but we can learn from the past. That knowledge is what empowers us. That sentence is basically taped on my mirror now, reminding me that knowledge, knowing what boundaries are healthy, how to enforce them, how to speak up when I feel uncomfortable, will help me avoid repeating past mistakes. I no longer blame myself for having been in that relationship with Travis. I recognize that predators and harassers aren't always easy to spot. They can be people who come across as perfectly normal until circumstances reveal their true colors. The fact that Travis chose to ignore my pleas, justified his brother's behavior, and finally lashed out at me in public says more about him than it does about me. Right now, I'm in this sort of in-between space. I'm not actively seeking a relationship, but I'm also not entirely closed off to the idea. If I do decide to give Jordan a chance, or anyone else for that matter, I'll be entering it with more caution, but also with a deeper sense of what I deserve. I deserve someone who, if I tell them I'm uncomfortable, will listen and try to understand instead of shutting me down. I deserve someone who will defend me if someone else crosses my boundary. I deserve someone who respects my autonomy, my body, my heart. That's the final lesson I'd leave my younger self if I could go back in time. You're not obligated to endure anyone's disrespectful behavior just because you love them, or because you're new in town, or because it's family. And the truth is, you can be a warm, forgiving person and still uphold firm boundaries. Those aren't contradictions. They're healthy, complementary traits. As for Dave, I never saw him again after that second incident. Travis made sure to vilify me when I left, painting me as oversensitive and dramatic to his family, from what I heard through the grapevine. But that's none of my business now. I stand by my decision to walk away, knowing full well that if they refuse to see the validity of what happened, that's on them. I refuse to let their denial shape my reality any. I share my story because I hope that someone else who might be in a similar position will read it and know they're not alone. They're not crazy, and they have every right to. It's not easy, and sometimes the fallout is painful, like Travis storming onto my campus and yelling hurtful things about my worth and my body. But trust me, when I say, staying in a situation where your boundaries are systematically trampled is far more damaging in the long run. Looking back, it's almost surreal how short our relationship was. 4 months. Yet the level of anxiety, confusion, and emotional exhaustion I felt made it seem like years of wear and tear. That's part of what made me realize this was not normal, not sustainable. A partner who truly cares would not shrug off your feelings of discomfort, especially not about physical boundary violations. They wouldn't stand by while their sibling harasses you. They certainly wouldn't blow up at you with insults in public when you call it quits. It was a painful chapter, but it was just that, a chapter, not the entire book of my life. I'm choosing to believe that the future can hold better things for me. Though it's still scary at times, I remind myself of how far I've come since that awful day at the coffee shop. I'm proud of the woman who found the courage to leave, who sought help, who opened up to support groups, and who eventually found herself stronger on the other side. And in practical terms, how do I handle the prospect of dating again? Well, the short answer is slowly, with eyes wide open, while giving myself permission to walk away the moment I sense a red flag. I no longer believe I owe anyone an explanation if they cross my boundary. If something feels off, I will speak up. And if they dismiss me, that's all the information I need to know this is not going to work. I'm also letting myself heal at my own pace. If I don't feel ready to date for another 6 months or even a year, that's okay. My worth isn't tied up in whether I'm in a relationship or not. For now, I study with Jordan, sometimes grabbing lunch together at the student union. He'll occasionally drop subtle hints like, oh, that new movie is out this weekend, or I heard there's a cool art exhibit downtown, but he never pressures me to say yes. When I politely deflect or show disinterest, he just nods. I appreciate that more than he probably realizes. Maybe in time, if I feel comfortable, I'll say, hey, yeah, let's check out that exhibit, and we'll slowly explore what dating might look like. But it will be on my terms, in a way that feels safe and uplifting. I won't lie. Sometimes I catch a glimpse of Dave's face in my nightmares, or I'll remember Travis's screaming outburst on campus and feel a pang of anxiety, wondering if something like that could happen again. But then, I ground myself by thinking about the supportive network I have now. My aunt, my new friends, my counselor, my women's support group. I'm not alone. If anything like that ever happens again, I'm better equipped to handle it. I know my boundaries. I know my resources, and I know I'm deserving of respect. On difficult days, I look back and realize that leaving Travis was an act of self-love and self-preservation. I also acknowledge that without that experience, I might never have learned how crucial it is to stand up for myself. It taught me that a nice guy facade can slip away quickly when you express displeasure or refuse to be sexualized in a way that makes you uncomfortable. It taught me to value my instincts and to trust that if I'm feeling creeped out, there's probably a good reason. And most importantly, it taught me that the right people will believe me, support me, and stand by my side rather than trivialize my concerns. Where does this story end then? In a sense, it ends in hope. I'm studying hard for a future in a field I'm passionate about. Perhaps I'll go into medicine, research, or something else entirely. I have supportive loved ones now, a stable living situation, and a growing sense of self-confidence. I've also learned to identify what healthy relationships look like. I'm beginning to spot the difference between a partner who pays me a respectful compliment versus one who parades my body around for others' amusement. I'm discovering that if someone truly values me, they'll want me to feel safe, never pressuring me to be or do something I'm uncomfortable with. In the end, healing is a journey, not an overnight fix. Sometimes I have flashbacks to that barbecue when Dave made that disgusting remark, or how my then-boyfriend told me to chill out. But now, instead of spiraling into shame or blaming myself, I can say, wow, that was awful. I didn't deserve that. I'm glad I left. And then I move on with my day. That's the conclusion. I chose myself. I recognized the toxic dynamic, extracted myself from it, and have been rebuilding ever since. Now, I'm looking to the future with cautious optimism. I'm open to the idea of love, but I've also made a promise to myself that I won't ignore warning signs or let anyone shame me into silence. If a prospective partner can't handle that, then they aren't the right person for me. I hope that sharing this expanded story helps illuminate the emotional roller coaster I went through, the confusion, fear, and hurt, but also the resilience, the support I found, and the empowerment that came from standing my ground. Sometimes, the best logical conclusion to a relationship is to end it, especially if the situation has become unsafe or harmful. And though it might sound simple to an outsider, living through it was anything but. Yet, through the tears and the embarrassment and the lingering trauma, I've come out stronger. I survived it. I learned from it. And now, I know that I deserve so much more. That's what I hold on to whenever I feel my confidence wavering. I remind myself that I'm worthy of a partner who respects me, worthy of a life free from harassment, and capable of writing my own happy ending on my own terms. So if anyone reading this finds themselves in a similar predicament, feeling creeped out by a boyfriend's brother, or feeling dismissed by a partner who's supposed to protect you, trust that feeling. You're not overreacting. You're not crazy. Your comfort and safety matter. Sometimes walking away is the greatest act of strength, even if it's scary at first. Reach out for help. Find a friend, a family member, a support group, anyone who will listen and validate your experiences. Because once you see your own worth, once you break free from toxic dynamics, you open the door for all the good things that were waiting for you on the other side of fear. And that is truly how my story concludes, with the promise of better days ahead, the promise of self-love, and the ongoing process of healing. I'm proud of how far I've come. I'm hopeful about where I'm going. And for the first time in a while, I'm genuinely excited to see what the future holds. Whether that includes romance or just an amazing journey toward a fulfilling life, surrounded by people who uplift and respect.